Of course, we need to be able to send new messages, and therefore I'll add a new widget in the chat folder, new message.dart. Now, this can also be a stateless widget, but it should be a stateful widget because I actually want to be able to validate the user input and disable the send button if nothing was entered. So here I'll name this new message. And then, of course, import material.dart from the Flutter package. And what should we return here? Well, we can return a container, actually. Should work fine. With a little bit of margin, which I only want to have on the top, though. So I'll add some top margin here on this container so that there is some spacing between our text field and the message list. And I'll also add some padding with edge insets all of 8 as well, so that we also have some space inside of this text input box widget. And then the child here is a row, because I actually want to have 2 items next to each other, the actual text input field and the button to send the message. So here we need children, and the first child is a text field. Now here, a regular text field, because I'm not wrapping this in a form. I'll just validate it on the go, so to say, without a big form, because we don't need this here for this very basic input field. Now, you would get an error like this. You actually need to wrap this into expanded as well. Otherwise, a text field in a row will cause an error because it tries to take up too much space. With expanded around it, this will work, however. Now, on the text field, I'll add a decoration, input decoration, where I set a label of send message to make it clear what this text field does in case it wasn't clear. And I want to listen on every keystroke with the onChanged event here, with the onChanged function, where we get the user input and where we then can do something, for example, validate it and unlock the button to send it, which is the item I'll add next to the expanded widget here, an icon button. And this should be the send icon. So here I'll add a color of theme of context primary color, and I'll add an icon, which should be the send icon here. Now, of course, this button also needs an onPressed handler so that something happens or can happen when we click it. The button should also only be enabled if a message was entered. Therefore, in new message state, we can manage that state. We can have a variable entered message, which initially is an empty string. And here in onChanged, we call setState and set entered message equal to the value we got here. Now this will run on every keystroke, so we update the stored entered message with every keystroke. And now we can use entered message to lock or unlock the icon button by only conditionally adding this function. So on the icon button onPressed here, we can check if entered message trimmed is empty. If it is empty, we know we have no valid message, even after removing all excess white space with trim. And if that's the case, I'll set onPressed to null, which means it has no function attached, and this will automatically disable the button. That's how Flutter works. If the message is not empty, I will set this function here as a value for onPressed. So now there is a function to execute when the button is pressed, and therefore the button will be enabled. Now, right now we're not sending any message, but this should work already. So let's go to the chat screen, and there we have a column with our messages. Now, below the messages here, we can therefore now simply add our new message widget. And of course, you need to import new message start from the respective path here. So if we save this, we have this message here at the bottom and this annoying floating action button. We can entirely delete this. We don't need the floating action button anymore. So let's get rid of it like that. And now here's the send message button. It's disabled, but if I enter a valid message, it's enabled and I can press it. But of course, nothing happens right now, so we need to change this. We need to make sure that when we press this, we maybe also unfocus this field so that the keyboard goes away automatically, but then also that this message is being sent. Now I'll start with unfocusing. Here, this function should be triggered, and I don't want to write everything here in this anonymous function, so instead I'll rather add a function up here, send message, and in there I'll first of all use focus scope of context and call unfocus to close the keyboard, which might be open, and it's send message, which therefore is connected here, like this, without parentheses, just pointing at it. And inside of send message, we now want to use Firestore to create this new message. So for this, we import package cloud firestore.dart. And then here we can use firestore.instance and target the chat collection. And here we now want to add a new document, which we do with the add method. Now this takes a map, which describes the new document. And we want to have a text field here because every chat message should have a text field. Our dummy message has one too. So here, text, and the value should of course be the entered message, so what's stored in this variable. And that should be all we need to do to send a new message. Now this gives us a future, and we could wait for it to complete. We could show a loading spinner, but I think in a chat application we don't really need this, so that should really be all we need. And please note that we also don't need to add any authentication token or anything like that. This is all managed behind the scenes by Firebase here. So if we simply save this, we should be able to send a new message. If I enter one, does this work? And I click send, you see, here's my message. Now, of course, the formatting is not final, but this is my message. So that works. Now, 2 improvements. I think it would be nice if the message input field would be cleared thereafter. And I also want to make sure that the messages are ordered in the opposite direction so that the most recent message is here at the bottom and not at the top. To make sure that this happens, to make sure that the ordering is correct, we can go to messages.dart, and there on the list view there is a little extra field you can set. You can set reverse to true, and this will do just what the name implies. It will order the messages or the fields differently. It will scroll from the bottom to the top. Now, you see hello still is ordered below does this work, simply because of how the auto ID was created when I manually added this document. But if I delete this document with hello, so if I enter hello here, you see now this is at the bottom. So that's nice. Now for clearing the input, here in new message, I want to clear the message or the input whenever we send a new message. And to do that, we can add a controller to the text field here and create a new controller in our state here. A final controller, new text editing controller like this. And use this controller here in send message to call controller clear, and now bind this controller to the text field simply by pointing at it here on the controller argument. If we now save this and I type does this clear, you see it clears and this is also closed. Now, one thing you also see, however, is the ordering here still is not working entirely as it should. And you see that also here in Firebase, by default, the oldest document is the topmost one, and the most recent one is the bottommost one. And since we reverse this, here it's the opposite. Now, one way of ordering this correctly and making sure that we have a consistent order is that we also store a timestamp along with the text when a document is being created, and we then order by that timestamp. So here on new message, we can then go to the place where we add a new document, and besides text, we can also add a created at field. The name is up to you, doesn't have to be created at. And you can then use timestamp.now to create a new timestamp. Now, timestamp is a class that is made available by the Cloud Firestore package. Now with this, we create a timestamp which will be part of the document that's being stored, and it's stored in a created at field. So now when we retrieve the messages here, before we actually set up that listener or that stream, before we get access to that stream, on the collection we can actually call order by. And this allows us to order the documents we're about to fetch by a certain field. And we can order by created at, so by that new field I just added. Now, of course, my existing messages don't have that field, so I will quickly delete all those messages. If you have a lot of messages, you can also delete the entire chat collection instead. It will be recreated automatically as soon as you start adding messages again. But once it's empty, I'll save this, go back, and send a new message. Hello. Does this work? And you see, it's still ordered correctly, but simply because we have to specify how we want to order this. And by default, it's ordered in an ascending way. I want to order in a descending way though, so I'll set descending to true here. That's the second argument you can pass to order by. And if you set descending to true, you see now does this work as the second message here. So this message, which I submitted a little bit later than the first one. And if I add another new message, you will see that now this is the bottommost message. And even if I restart the app here, if I completely reload it, you see this order is kept. So now we finally have the correct order here, which is of course super important and which is what we ultimately want here. With that out of the way, let's work on those chat messages. They look a bit ugly like this. And of course, we also want to make sure that we can quickly tell whether this message is by us or by another user.